Chapter 16, Eumaeus. Now, you may notice that I am not in my usual spot at home because I am, in fact, on tour. But I am still rowing on, crew, still 10 pages a day. And if I can do it on a diet of Space Raider sandwiches and cider on tour, then you lot can do it at home. So we're on to Eumaeus, right? And I think it's basically plain sailing now till the end of the book. So enjoy these chapters. And I really like this one. This, for me, is back to Joyce. It's cinematic. So it's like, you know, I really got a feel for... We've all been there, haven't we, right? We've been on a night out and we've had too much. Either we've had too much or our mates had too much and we have to look after them. And that's exactly what happens in this chapter. Bloom looks after Stephen, who's had too much to drink and he's been punched out in the street, and Bloom is like getting him to his feet and saying like, come on, let's sort you out, we're gonna have to get you like off the streets and, you know, to you're gonna have to get you home somewhere. And so Bloom, we see in this chapter, Bloom picks Stephen up and he takes him to like a cabman shelter, which is like almost like an all-night cafe type thing. And we see Bloom pick Stephen up and yeah, he walks in there and they have a chat about random stuff, as you do when you're pissed, you know. You talk about random shit, and they do, and they get to the cafe, and then they meet a load of random people, like one of them being the sailor character, who like basically tells a load of tall tales. And I think Bloom, you know, from the get-go realises that this guy's full of shit and like he's just talking crap because he looks at a photo and sees that his name is different from the name that he'd given, and this guy has got a lot to say and he's very opinionated on a lot of different subjects, including Ireland and being Jewish and all this stuff. And we've all met people like this, people who are kind of, you know, they start off being kind of friendly in conversation when you start out, and then after a while the conversation kind of turns and things come a bit sketchy, and this guy ends up getting a knife out, which is kind of like just sets everyone on edge a bit, and like Stephen and Bloom are like, what the hell is happening here? So yeah, Stephen is bought a cup of coffee by Bloom. Bloom buys him a roll to eat, and so that's the main events of this chapter. The people they go into they walk back home basically, and Bloom looking after Stephen, and this is where we see Bloom as Stephen's protector, I guess, looking after him. So basically we can see here the wisdom in Bloom. He has been through life and he knows people can cause shit when you go out late at night after you've been drinking. And I think you see the wisdom of Bloom throughout this chapter compared to Stephen. It's like they're walking down the road, for example, on the way to the night, the cabsman's shelter, and someone comes up from the shadows, and like Bloom's like, he calls out to Stephen, and like Bloom's almost like, ignore him, like don't. It turns out it's Corley, Stephen's friend, but Bloom's really like, don't engage, don't, especially at this time of night, don't speak to people that you don't know. And you know, it's interesting. Stephen says, Stephen, that is when the accosting figure came to close quarters, though he was not in any sober state himself, recognised Corley's breath redolent of rotten corn juice. Lord John Corley, some called him, and his genealogy came about in this wise. He was the eldest son, blah, 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 blah. And it's basically, it turns out to be Stephen's friend, and Stephen's friend says, oh, bloody hell, I can't get a job, I'm like out of work. And Stephen ends up giving him some money, and he mistakes pennies for half crowns. And Bloom is absolutely, you know, gobsmacked that, you know, Stephen gives away all this money to his mate. Well, he's not really a mate, but just an acquaintance. He says, oh, and he's like, I'll give it you back, I'll pay you back, mate. And it's interesting. It's just like what you do when you're pissed, you know. You know, Stephen obviously is very foolhardy giving away this cash, and Bloom's horrified by it all. But it's just like, what are the things you do when you're young and drunk in it? And I think that's basically the theme of this chapter, really, is setting Bloom up to be Stephen's protector. You know, Bloom talks to Stephen about his dad and says like, oh, like, why don't you just go home? You know, your dad is really proud of you. And Stephen's like, I'm not having it. So then basically they go to this cafe, they meet a load of random people, including this sailor who's quite a really interesting character, and then we get to the end, and basically Stephen's got nowhere to stay. He's been dumped by his mates, and Bloom says, come and keep at my house if you want. And he goes, okay. And the two of them wander back. And it's a great little cinematic scene when they're wandering back from the night cafe towards Bloom's house. And basically they've got a street sweeper on the street that's kind of led by horses. And I don't know, the way it was described to me just was really, I could just imagine being there, because I've been out, many a time in the small hours of the morning, when the streets are really, really quiet, hardly anyone's about. And I think Joyce just captured this wonderfully, but I just thought it was really interesting, the fact, putting it back in the olden days with the street sweeper. It was nice. It says, the horse, having reached the end of his tether, so to speak, halted, and rearing high a proud feathering tail, added his quota by letting fall on the floor, which the brush would soon brush up and polish, 3 smoking globes of turds. Slowly, 3 times, one after another, from a full crupper he mired, and humanely his driver waited till he, or she, had ended patiently in his scythed car. Side by side, Bloom, profiting by the contretemps, with Stephen, passed through the gaps of the chains, divided by the upright, and stepping over a strand of mire, went across towards Gardner Street lower, Stephen singing more boldly, but not loudly, the end of the ballad. So Stephen started to bloody sing now, he's that pissed. The driver never said a word, good, bad, or indifferent. He merely watched the 2 figures as he sat on his low-backed car, both black, one full, one lean, walked towards the railway bridge to be married again by Father Mayor. As they walked, they at times stopped and walked again, continuing their tete-a-tete, which, of course, he was utterly out of, about sirens, enemies of man's reason, mingled with a number of other topics of the same category, usurpers, historical cases of the kind, while the man in the sweeper car, or you might as well call it in the sleeper car, who in any case couldn't possibly hear because they were too far, simply sat in his seat near the end of Lower Gardner Street and looked after their low-backed car. And that is the end of that chapter. And we have 2 more chapters to go. And I hope you're getting more out of it. This is a plain sailing. This point of the book now, for me, is where it brought everything together and made me reflect upon the other harder chapters that I'd read, the chapters that I really struggle with and thought, what the hell? These chapters coming up really just started to cement everything together and make me realise what a work of pure genius this book is. My coming up next is my favourite chapter of the book, Ithaca. So keep rowing. This is going to be great fun. And I don't know where I'll be when I post my next video, but I will be on tour, and I'm doing it while I'm on tour, so keep reading it, people, and see you soon.